Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to give a few more minutes for other participants to join if they have not already. If you can, please, okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know that you can hear me. So we'll just give everybody else a few more minutes to join. Okay, I'll give one more minute since we have a lot of information to get through. So I'll give one more minute for other participants to show up and then we'll start. Okay, everyone. Hello and good afternoon. I'm so glad that you could join us here today. I'm Adrienne Gilliard, and our training today is going to be on selective mutism and sensory processing disorder. It's going to be given by me and Miss Elizabeth Libby Snyder. She's on with me today. And let's go ahead and start. So, okay. So, before we get into anything, we'll talk about attendance and credits. The trainings for the month of June are for in-service hours only. Please refer to the ELC website at www.elcbroward.org for information about other possible stipend information and opportunities. Your training certificate will be mailed within 24 hours and sent to the email address that you entered in when you registered. In order for you to be marked as attended, you need to log into the computer or download the GoToWebinar app on your cell phone. Just calling in does not register attendance, and you won't receive a certificate or be marked as attending. If we can't see the screen, then we can't see you. And only to be used if you don't want to use computer audio, you can use your telephone, and the number is below. It's 954-377-1234, and the access code is there on the bottom. So since COVID-19, we have been getting pretty familiar with the whole GoToWebinar platform, as well as other webinar platforms. So I think we are all a little bit more knowledgeable about it now, but still we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. First, there's a chat box. If you click on the chat icon at the top of your toolbar, you can use the send or drop down menu to select the recipient of your message. If you select everyone, then all of the participants here will see your messages in the chat pane. If you select organizers only, then Libby and I will see your message, just the two of us. And if you select individual attendee, then only the selected participant or attendee will receive your private message. We also have a handout section here on this platform, and the icon is on your toolbar. All you have to do is tap the icon, select the file to download, and that file will download automatically. We have about 5 handouts that you will find very beneficial in this webinar, so they're there. We also have the hand raising tool. You can raise and lower your hand by clicking the icon on the control panel. I do ask that if you use this feature, if you raise your hand and we get to your question, please lower your hand so that it's not up for the entire training. Also, we do have a large group, so if we don't get to your questions now, our email addresses will be listed in the PowerPoint for you to reach out to us with any other questions, but we'll do our very best to answer your questions today. Now I'll give you a little bit of background information about me. Again, I'm Adrienne Gilliard. I hold a Master's of Education in Early Childhood Education with a concentration in culturally responsive education. I hold a teaching license in early childhood education, both in North Carolina and South Carolina. I also have 3 class observation certifications, and that's for infants, toddlers, and pre-K. I have a TA coaching certificate, over 21 years in the field of early childhood education, and every single year has been absolutely wonderful. It gets better from one year to the next. And I also have an ABD in teaching and learning, and ABD means all but dissertation. So I'm a dissertation away from getting my doctoral degree. I do have a few hobbies. They include reading, roller skating, different types of crafting, and now, since the coronavirus, I love to garden. So I have an herb garden. And like I said, coronavirus is responsible for that, because I would have never imagined myself liking to dig in soil and picking worms off of stuff and gardening, but that's what I do now. And I also really enjoy spending time with my family. I have a wonderful husband of 4 years, an amazingly charismatic and funny 7-year-old stepson, and a dog that's mixed with French Bulldog and human. I say that because he does things that I have never seen a dog do before. And I also need to use this as my disclaimer. If you hear snoring in the background, that's him, because he snores like a grown man that works 12-hour shifts every day. So forgive me, and I apologize if you hear that, but I'll try my best to drown him out. All right. I want to point your attention to this excerpt that's on the screen. It says, just because I don't speak doesn't mean I'm not smart. I have above average intelligence. Just because I don't speak does not mean I'm not listening to you. I hear every word you say. Just because I don't speak doesn't mean I don't have feelings. Mean words hurt. Just because I don't speak doesn't mean I'm choosing to be this way. I suffer from selective mutism, a form of social anxiety that makes it difficult to speak when I'm not comfortable. I thought that it was very beneficial for us to cover this today because more and more in our preschool classrooms, we're seeing children who may have selective mutism, or they at least show the symptoms of selective mutism. So it's important for us to have a little bit more information about it, and also just to have some tools in our toolkit in terms of strategies to work with the children that we may suspect have selective mutism. So psychogenic mutism is the umbrella, and this occurs when someone, usually a child who is capable of speaking, just stops speaking. A child who meets a stranger and doesn't respond to questions is exhibiting a moment of psychogenic mutism. And there are three types of psychogenic mutism. There's elective mutism, and this is when a person chooses not to speak as a result of psychological issues. There's total mutism, when a person doesn't speak under any circumstances at all. And then there's selective mutism, which we're here to talk about today. And this is when a person wants to speak, but in certain circumstances, they find that they cannot speak. So what is selective mutism? Selective mutism is, or SM. You may hear me throughout the training going back and forth between saying selective mutism and SM, but it's an anxiety disorder in which a child is unable to speak in some settings and to some people. Children with SM they talk normally at home, and when they're at home alone with their parents, but cannot speak at all or speak above a whisper when they're in other social settings. And that's at school, in public, even at extended family gatherings. What selective mutism is not is a developmental or speech disorder. When an individual is comfortable and they select to speak, their speech is usually normal and void of any kind of speech impediment. There's several symptoms of selective mutism, and that's the failure to speak in specific social situations. One of the symptoms is that the children are very shy and they have difficulty maintaining eye contact. Sometimes they display blank expressions and a reluctance to smile. There are stiff and awkward movements that are displayed in children with selective mutism. They also have difficulties expressing their feelings even to their closest family members. Sometimes they say that they have, one of the symptoms is moodiness, and they also have a sensitivity to noise and crowd and the desire for routine, and they dislike changes. I want to pick out one symptom that is not listed here, but it's one that we see often in the early childhood classroom, and I think we probably glaze over it or don't pay it that much attention. But oftentimes we see neurosis or daytime wetting that's really common in the selective mutism population. And this is because children have a difficult time indicating to the teacher that they need to go to the bathroom. Children in daycares and our preschool settings, they are frequently prompted to use the bathroom. And you know, as teachers, we read body language. So we know that when a child is having their legs crossed or they're wiggling around, we know that, you know, if they're holding themselves, usually they have to go to the bathroom. So we give them that prompt to go use the bathroom. We also have times within our schedule, our daily schedules, that we do potty time. But as children get older, there are less frequent prompts. The teacher doesn't prompt them to go to the potty. There are no scheduled potty times usually. So these children need to go to the bathroom outside of the prompts. And if they are clamming up and they don't speak to the teacher, or either they don't speak very much at all anyway, it's probably really hard for them to go up to the teacher and say that they need to have a bathroom break. And so this leads to the wetting accident. So that was one of the symptoms that I wanted to point out, and it's important because it also embarrasses them, which causes another effect of them being mute. So some causes of selective mutism, it is various factors that fit into different groups, and there are three specific groups. Those specific groups include the predisposing factors, and these are the things that trigger the onset of selective mutism. There are also the precipitating factors, and these are the things that are already in place that have contributed to selective mutism. And then there are the perpetuating factors, and these are the things that maintain these symptoms. And we'll go a little bit deeper. When we talk about the predisposing factors, they include anxiety, shyness, timidity, negative self-image related to speech. Sometimes the child may or may not like the sound of their voice. And then there's bilingualism. We see these predisposing factors happening in our classroom during circle time. You know, we've all had these experiences with children who are attending circle time by listening and watching, but when it's time for the group to participate in terms of singing a song or reciting the alphabet or reciting the numbers, they don't participate in that way. They don't say anything. It also happens when a child is asked a question by an adult or when the child is approached by their classmates. Also, like we said before, if a child needs to go to the bathroom and they need to ask to do so, they're probably not going to ask because of their shyness, their anxiety, and their timidity. And I don't know that we really think about this factor, but it also might happen when we have certain expectations of a child to use polite words. For example, if you're giving a child a graham cracker at snack and you say, okay, say thank you or say please, and they don't say those words, it's not because they are being defiant and they don't want to, it's because they physically can't. So it happens at home and in public when adults and other children prompt these children to speak, to answer anything, or to just engage verbally. To explain selective mutism or SM a little bit more and their lack of response further, we can look at this diagram of the brain. So when a child with SM does not answer any questions or speak, the little purple thing is called the amygdala. And the amygdala is what gives children the fight, flight, or freeze response. They are put into situations when they're prompted to speak or engage. And this might happen hundreds of times a day, even for young children, where somebody is talking to them or asking them to speak. So the children that are like the deer in headlights, these are the ones who, when they're prompted to talk and they need to speak to an adult, they get tearful, they back away, they hide, and they avoid the person altogether. I've seen children flat out run and go hide under a table. And these children, their amygdala is telling them to take flight. Then we have the child that's anxious and oppositional. So when you speak to that child, instead of them getting tearful or running away and hiding, it might look different. They look defiant or angry in their non-speaking behavior. And their amygdala is giving them that fight response. And that's to look tough so that you stop, talking to them or stop requesting them to talk. Then there are the children who are anxious or they give very late or delayed responses. And these children freeze. And the majority of the children with selective mutism freeze. So moving on to the precipitating factors, there's new school admission. When children go into a new school setting, the classroom is different, the school is different, the teacher is different, they have new classmates, and they are overwhelmed. So they won't talk. Also, children who go through frequent geographical moves, they may feel like, okay, this is my third school this year, so there's really no need for me to talk to the teacher for her to get to know me or talk to my peers and me to get to know them because I won't be here next month anyway. Then there are family belonging to the linguistic minority. This is when the teacher doesn't understand that child's native language and the child doesn't understand the language that the peers and the teacher speaks in. And another factor could be the negative reactions to the child talking in general. They could be getting bullied because of their linguistic because of them belonging to the linguistic minority. They may get bullied because of that. They may get yelled at. Those are some of the factors. Some of the perpetuating factors include social isolation of families, the lack of understanding by teachers and families, and that lack of understanding can not only be about the language, it could also be about the nature of the child in general. Also, reinforcement of mutism by attention or affection. You may have some parents or some teachers say, oh, they're so quiet, they just never talk. Oh, I just love how quiet she is. So that may be reinforcing the child's selective mutism. Also, a heightened anxiety level caused by the pressure to speak, and the ability to convey messages non-verbally. Have you ever seen a child that is from a very large family, a lot of siblings, and they just don't talk? because everybody pretty much caters to them and knows exactly what they want by the way they look, by the way they gesture. They may grunt. So that child really doesn't feel like they have a need to talk because everybody already knows what they want. To understand selective mutism and conceptualize it, this picture here, this chart, gives you an indication of the cyclical effect. So first, the child is prompted to speak or engage. And children with selective mutism, what happens is they get anxious and they try to avoid. What happens then is when the adult rescues, it's not just the adult though. Peers can rescue, siblings can rescue, parents and teachers, they're all frequent rescuers. And they do it in a lot of different ways. The most common way is that parents and teachers and peers, they talk for the child. For example, when a child comes into the classroom, the teacher says, "Hey, Jenny, how was your weekend?" And Jenny looks up at her mom and she has a frightened look on her face. It's that deer in the headlights look. And mom says, "Oh, we had a good weekend. We went camping and we did this and we did that." That is a way that mom has now taken over the conversation for Jenny and has rescued her. Another way that adults rescue is by no longer asking the child a question. And we see this in the classroom a lot too. So when it comes to that child's turn during circle time for that child to answer, if you say, "Jenny, what letter comes after C?" you already know that the child isn't going to answer. So a lot of times the teacher just will skip over that child and ask the next child so that there is an answer. And then sometimes the teacher will start by asking only yes and no questions so that the child only has to nod or shake their head instead of talking. We've seen children as young as 3 years old, sometimes when peers come in to rescue. If you have a substitute teacher in the classroom and you ask Jenny a question and one of the other children will say, "Well, you don't have to ask her that. Jenny doesn't talk very much." So that child has learned to rescue Jenny from having to talk as well. And when someone, if we look at the square on the bottom that says decreased anxiety, child and adult, when someone rescues that child from that speaking situation, it decreases the anxiety. Not only does it decrease the anxiety for the child because they no longer have to do what they're feeling fearful about doing, it also decreases anxiety for the adult because we see the child in anguish and struggling and nobody wants to see a child struggling. So it decreases anxiety for everybody. The child gets that deer in the headlights look, so we rescue. When we rescue, the child looks more comfortable. It decreases our anxiety and discomfort. And then what that does is it accidentally reinforces that behavior. It negatively reinforces that behavior. So there's an increased likelihood of avoidance. The next time that child is more likely to avoid the adults and the peers that are used to stepping in and rescuing them. And the problem is, this gets practiced time after time, day after day, month after month, and year after year, over and over again until it becomes this child's way of interacting with the world. And that's the crux of the problem and the difficulty with children with selective mutism. They get a lot of practice in not talking, and we get a lot of practice in rescuing them. So I hope this helps you to conceptualize selective mutism and see how it works. We have some myths of selective mutism that we're going to work through today. One of the myths about selective mutism is that selectively mute children have been traumatized or abused. There's another myth that says it's just a shyness and kids with selective mutism will probably grow out of it. Kids with selective mutism have speech problems. Another myth says that children with selective mutism are oppositional or manipulative. Another myth says children with SM can speak if adults make clearer demands. And the biggest one that we get, and we see a lot of people trying to make correlations with, is that selective mutism is a form of autism. So these are probably all myths that we've heard before, but what we plan on doing is demystifying those myths. For the first one, selectively mute children have been traumatized or abused. There's no evidence that links selective mutism to trauma, even though we know that there are some instances where there is a correlation, but there's no evidence that links the two. And children who are selectively mute are comfortable speaking at home, but they're overcome by anxiety when they are in other social situations. The next myth that we'll demystify is that SM is just shyness and kids with SM will grow out of it. So like a lot of childhood disorders, we always think, okay, well, they'll just grow out of it. That's just a phase. But selective mutism is a type of social anxiety that is a lot more extreme than just ordinary shyness. It's a paralyzing inability to speak, which interferes with the child's life and development. And some children do eventually overcome selective mutism without treatment, but they endure years of suffering and they miss out on age-appropriate activities and development. In my research, I read some excerpts from adults who had selective mutism as kids, and they talk about it, like it says, as a paralyzing inability. They talk about it as paralysis, and they said it is absolutely painful. They want to answer, they want to tell you, yes, I want the cookie, or yes, I want milk, but it physically hurts them for them to be able to talk. They're paralyzed, they can't say it. The next myth is kids with selective mutism have speech problems. Research indicates that while some children with selective mutism do have a speech delay, the two conditions are unrelated, and many selectively mute children have no speech or language learning problems. When children cannot speak to unfamiliar adults, their verbal skills may be underestimated. A lot of children with selective mutism are very well spoken when you do hear them speak. Children with SM are oppositional or manipulative. So there used to be the idea that selective mutism was elective mutism, that children just didn't want to speak. And it was blamed on parents, and it was just called poor parenting. Well, that parent won't make their child speak. Their parent is allowing them to do that. So it was blamed on the parent. But the truth is that selective mutism stems from the social anxiety and inhibition, not anger, not a desire to control the situation, but the children experience it as an inability to speak. The next myth is that children with SM can speak if adults make clear demands. The pressure to speak is precisely what children with selective mutism find the most paralyzing. What they need are interventions and strategies in place to reduce that anxiety and to encourage efforts to speak with a positive reinforcement. And the big thing is making sure that you're careful to give a child 5 seconds of extra time to respond to a question. And that'll give them time to find their voice and find the courage to say something. But if the child doesn't answer, if they don't say that D comes after C in like 3 seconds, well, never mind, I'll go to the next person. You haven't effectively given that child enough time to find their voice, to even think about what the answer is, and just to, just to have a voice in that minute. So just remember to give them at least 5 seconds of extra time. So the one that I said we hear most frequently is that SM is a form of autism. Children with selective mutism, when they're feeling anxious, they often react with the lack of eye contact, the blank expressions, and other behaviors that look like an autism spectrum disorder. We've all seen some of those signs, but selective mutism is fundamentally different from autism. Again, while children with autism lack social and communication skills, children with SM are severely inhibited to speak in certain situations. They just can't. So children with selective mutism, they can speak. They have communication and social skills. They just can't speak. But children with autism, in some spectrums of autism, they lack those social communication skills. So before I move on to the next part, are there any questions at this time?
Adrian, there's no questions, but people are saying thanks for doing this and letting us know that they're here. So we welcome everybody, and that's about it so far.
Okay, good. All right, we'll keep moving, and I'm glad you guys are enjoying this training and the information that we're sharing today. Okay.
I have one.
You
Somebody
have one question?
somebody came in a little late and they want to know, what is elective mutism?
That is when a child or a person chooses not to speak. They just choose not to. Selective mutism is they are unable to speak in social situations. But if it's elective, they can speak in any social situation, they just choose not to.
That looks like about it.
Okay. So we are going to move on to the evaluation part and some of the strategies that we can use for children who have selective mutism in our classrooms. And so SLP evaluations for suspected SM is pretty vast. And SLP is short for speech language pathologist. And they do the speech and language evaluations. And the evaluation that they do, it seeks information on the child's expressive language ability. What usually happens here is the SLP will get the parent to bring in a video of the child speaking at home so that they can gauge where that child is in their expressive language ability. They're also looking for information on language comprehension that they can get from standardized tests and informal observations, and also the handy dandy ASQ will tell us some information about language comprehension. And they're also looking for information about that child's verbal and non-verbal communication pragmatics. What they use is the selective mutism stages of social communication. It's a tool that determines the child's baseline level of comfort in their communication and developing individualized step-by-step strategies to help that child and to help them progress into speech in all aspects of their life. And this scale or this tool describes the various stages of social communication that are possible for the children that suffer from SM. Okay. All right. So here is the social communication bridge, and this is the scale of the SCAT, and it illustrates the selective mutism stages of social communication in a visual format. And this is what they use to determine the stage of social communication from setting to setting. And this is what determines a lot of the therapy that's used. And we'll look a little bit more at the therapy next. When they treat selective mutism, when speech language pathologists treat selective mutism, they use augmentative and alternative communication, otherwise known as AAC, which provides assistive technology and other tools and devices that a child uses to help them communicate their needs. It also includes teaching children gestures that they can use to communicate. If they are in the nonverbal stage, which is stage 1, SLPs usually use shaping, and this is when they are reinforcing any attempts that the child makes at communication. It might involve the use of AAC, which is that assistive technology, pointing, gesturing, whispering, or sound production of any kind. And as the child moves up the ladder of communication towards speaking, larger positive reinforcers are given. Self-modeling is usually used when children are in the stage 2 or transitional stage. And this is when a video of the child is taken and that child is speaking with one of their familiar adults, their parents or their sibling, and it's in a comfortable setting. And they take that videotape and they show the video to the child, to help increase their confidence in their ability to speak. The child looks at the video of themselves and says, you know what, I am pretty neat. I do speak pretty well. You know, that gives them a little bit of confidence in themselves. So self-modeling is one of the treatments. And the last treatment that they have, and that's usually for stage 3, it's when a child masters each level of communication. That's speaking with you, the teacher, speaking with the SLP, and speaking in other settings. The SLP gradually increases the number of individuals in the room. Then they slowly increase their proximity to the child and their involvement in the conversation.
Adrian,
Yes.
we have a question. How early or young does SM present in children?
SM can be presented in children as early as 3 to 4 years old.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we are not certified SLPs. We don't diagnose the children. We can suspect. There are strategies that we can employ in the classroom that can help children who are struggling with speaking. And some of these things include, initially, don't direct speech to the child. If you see that the child is uncomfortable and they hold their head down, initially don't direct speech to that child. You can also reduce eye contact and focus on the child. Don't ignore the child, but just reduce the amount of eye contact and focus. Also, don't call attention to the child talking or not talking. We also see that one of the best strategies is don't talk about the child to parents or other therapists in front of the child. And this is a big one to me. Never coerce or trick the child into speaking, because sometimes we can think we are so clever if we, ask a child something, or if we do something that's, kind of sneaky and it forces the child to speak. That's one of the things that we definitely don't need to do, because it also creates mistrust, which means that the child probably will sink deeper and really won't want to speak to us at that point. Another strategy is to reduce the amount of people that are around and the expectations placed on the child. Even though we may think that it's necessary for a child to say please and thank you after they're given something or after a request, if you know that that child feels uncomfortable speaking, in those situations, you might need to let it, just let it go and take some of those expectations off of that. Also, any type of communication, including whispering, is better than no communication at all. So if you have a child that's in your classroom and you're in circle time and you notice that this time they decided to whisper the answer to your question, receive that answer in a whisper. Receive it as it is. You don't have to say, speak up, we can't hear you. Receive it in a whisper, because it's better than nothing at all. Also, like we talked about earlier, when you're asking a child a question, wait 5 seconds. And then if there's no reply, ask again by providing direct choice options or yes or no questions. But give them that extra little bit of grace when when you ask them a question, because they just may surprise you and answer. This is an acronym that is used when we're dealing with children who have selective mutism. And the acronym is P.R.I.D.E. So the P is for labeled praise. This is when the teacher gives a lot of labeled praise of what the child is doing appropriately. So let's say, for example, you have a child that is building with Legos. One of the things that you might say is, oh, I love the way you're using so many different colors. Your house is really coming together nicely. That looks fantastic. Give them that labeled praise. The R stands for reflection. And anytime a child is communicating something to you in any way, the adult is reflecting it back or saying it back. Some children, when they feel comfortable, will answer your questions or they'll talk to you a little bit. If the child does say something to you, reflect back exactly what they're saying and the way that they said it. But more commonly, if we have a child that's in our classroom with selective mutism, chances are they're not talking to you anyway. So you can reflect the things that they're communicating non-verbally through gestures or pointing. For example, if a child is building with the Legos and the teacher says, oh, I love the castle that you're building, and the child then points to the moat, and you can say, oh, thank you so much for showing me the water that you're putting there. I love that. That is such a good idea. The adult is just pretty much reflecting back what's being communicated, even though that child has not been verbal. Next is the I for imitation, and it means that the adult is doing what the child is doing. They're playing with the child and not just standing over the child or standing to the side and watching them and hovering over them. Sometimes that makes the child more intimidated if you're just standing there. But if you include yourself, not take over, but if you include yourself in their activity, they may warm up a little bit. It stands for description. But to be more specific, it is the behavioral description. And we can think about this best as just saying it's like you're given a play-by-play description of the interaction. It's almost like, the play-by-play of a baseball game or a basketball game. So if a child is just playing with their blocks, you can say things like, oh, I love the blocks that you're choosing to use. Those are such beautiful colors. Oh, your castle is coming together nicely and you're building another side to it. Oh, look at you, you're making it so tall. All you're doing is basically providing commentary. Everything that you see, you're commenting on it. You're playing back exactly what they're doing. And the child is like, oh yeah, I am doing that. Oh yeah, this is pretty fantastic. I am using nice colors. I did make good choices. Lastly, this is really important. The E stands for excitement and enjoyment. Obviously, you want to show that you're enjoying the time that you're spending with the child, and you want to just show that you are enjoying that moment, period. And that will give them more comfort as well. So you might want to take your phones out for this part. These are some resources on selective mutism that I compiled. It's a compilation of organizations that offer information, webinars, and educational opportunities that'll help you grow in this area, just to give you a little bit more knowledge, some more resources, and some more things that you can work on if you do have a child with selective mutism or you suspect they have selective mutism. There's ASHA, there's the Selective Mutism Association. I starred the Selective Mutism Learning University because it is an actual class, online class that you can take for free. And it goes through the scenarios of different scenarios that you may encounter. And it helps you to figure out what to say and what not to say. It helps you to figure out whether or not you have mastered interacting with a child with selective mutism. So that's a really good one. And then there's the SMART Center, and the Child Mind Institute is also a really good resource that offers free webinars to help you better understand the ins and outs of selective mutism. So take your phones out and take a screenshot of this slide, because I think you'll really enjoy the resources that it provides. Okay. All right. Now, I realized after we started the presentation that although I included a poll, I did not upload the poll to the platform. So what I would like for you to do now, this poll is which celebrity had SM as a child? So what I'd like for you to do is go to your chat pane and enter in what you think the answer is. So was the celebrity Barbara Streisand? Was it B, Maya Angelou? Was it C, Adam Sandler? Or D, Stevie Wonder? So if you could go to the chat pane and enter in what you think the answer is. Are there answers coming in?
Yeah, yes, there sure are. We've got a lot of answers, and it looks like Adam Sandler is moving forward and has the most so far.
Okay. I see. Okay. Okay. I see a Barbara Streisand coming in. Angelou. Another Adam Sandler.
Yeah, quite a few of those. Then he's also C, so there's a lot of C's in here. I was trying to count them, but
I see a lot of Adam Sandlers.
You guys are doing great.
Okay, I see a lot of Adam Sandlers.
Yeah, I think that's the consensus.
I'll give y'all a few more seconds to enter in your final choice. Stevie Wonder. Okay. So I see we have, and thank you for the participation. I appreciate you guys logging into the chat pane, your answer. I appreciate that. So now we will unveil who that person was. So the celebrity was Maya Angelou. So if that is who you selected, then you are absolutely correct. So when Maya Angelou was 8 years old, she stopped speaking. She silenced her voice because she thought her voice had killed a man. For almost 5 years, the only person she spoke to was her brother. What ended up happening was her mother's boyfriend had raped her, and she testified against him at his trial, and he was convicted and sentenced, but he was later released from jail. But 4 days after he was released from jail, he was found murdered by her uncles. So I know earlier we said that selective mutism is not linked to a trauma, but there are those instances when they are. But I also want you to remember when I was saying that a lot of people, one of the myths that we have to demystify is that children who have selective mutism have a speech disorder or a speech delay. As we all know, Maya Angelou was an eloquent speaker, an eloquent writer. So she did not have any kind of speech disorders at all. So that was one of those myths that we had to demystify. So thank you all for my portion of this training right now. I appreciate you all listening. I hope I imparted good information to you. If you have any other questions, this is my contact information. You can reach me at agilliard@elcbroward.org. These are just some of the references from my portion. And at this time, I have the absolute pleasure, and it is my delight to introduce to you Miss Elizabeth Libby Snyder with her sensory processing disorder training. Hello? Libby, are you there?
There we go. I'm sorry. My mic was giving me a hard time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second half of our presentation. We feel very fortunate that you were able to get on with us, and we really appreciate it. Again, my name is name of the disorder that I'm going to be speaking about is called sensory processing disorder, and let's just get going, shall we?
All right.
Okay.
Did you want me to go back?
But yeah.
Okay.
I can't see it. There we go. Okay. This is just a picture of a child that has sensory processing disorder, and we're going to talk about the different things that happen to a child that has. And I'm going to switch out just like Adrian did. I'm going to say SPD sometimes instead of sensory processing disorder because it makes me tongue-tied. Anyway, some of the things that we'll be talking about is things that children it may look like they are giving you a hard time or rebelling, but these are things that physically and mentally hurt them if they have to do them. And it's important for us to understand that children with this really do need to have the support and the caring in order for them to be able to succeed. Okay. You can move to the next, okay. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in special education and a master's level endorsement in early childhood special education. I've been in the I have been in the Broward County school system in the special ed early childhood programs, as well as in other programs throughout Dayton Broward County. I have the pre-K class observation certification and over 25 years of early childhood and early childhood special education. I was the manager of the positive behavior support program in Broward County for 5 years. I have, and a little bit about me, I have personally, I have been married to a wonderful husband for 44 years. We have 3 children and are blessed with 6 amazing grandchildren. And my favorite place to go and to be when I'm not working is with my family. That they all live in Florida, but they don't live so very close to me and in Central Florida. And I love to go to the beach. So that's a little bit about me. And I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Okay. Since I told you, sensory processing disorder, SPD, is a condition in which the brain has trouble receiving and responding to information that comes in through the senses. So when we smell, our brain interprets what we smell, and then if we smell a lemon, our brain interprets what we smell and tells us what the name of that is. And that can be a problem because there are things that children have that if they can't process it correctly, then it's very scary for them, and it's not a good place to be. And if you look at the picture, it's I have, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Sensory processing is a disorder, and formerly it used to be called sensory integration dysfunction, but it's not currently recognized as a distinct medical diagnosis. So they don't have it as a diagnosis, and that can be challenging for parents sometimes because of insurance issues and things like that. But occupational therapists and other therapists can work with the children to be able to help them move through this and learn strategies that they can use to be able to not have to deal with it in such an extreme way. Some people with sensory processing disorders are oversensitive to things in their environment. Common sounds can be painful and overwhelming. The light touch of a shirt may actually make them feel like it's agitated or it's aggravated their skin. And other sensory process disorders they might be uncoordinated. They might bump into things. They might be able to tell where their limbs are in space. And it'd be hard to engage in conversation or play with other children. And that's a difficult thing for them. Sorry, hold on one second. There we go. Okay, sensory processing is okay. Sorry about that. Sensory processing disorder may affect one sense, like hearing or touch or taste, or it might affect multiple senses. And people that can have over and under responsive to things that have difficulties with. So some kids might shut down when they hear loud noises, and some kids might overreact and have a meltdown because of what's happening to them. Like many illnesses, the symptoms of sensory processing disorder exist on a spectrum or a range. And you can have 2 things at one time. SPD can also be with the child might have anxiety as well. You see it on the little picture that I put up there. They can have sleeping difficulties, easily frustrated, irritable, prefer to be alone, physical complaints about their health, and my stomach hurts, I have to go to the bathroom, I don't like this, I have a headache, and also absenteeism. They can be absent a lot because of this, how they feel. And then SPD and ADHD come together, but it's when those 2 come together, they are easily distracted, short attention span, impulsive and aggressive, moves around excessively, trouble listening, cannot easily complete tasks. Now, these things, I want to remind you, these are things that the child has no control over. A child that has this issue and this disorder does not have control over this. So when they get into trouble, they're getting into trouble for something that they can't help, and that's hard. In some children, for example, the sound of a leaf blower outside a window may cause them to be so upset that they vomit, or, as Adrienne said before, dive under a table. They may scream when touched. They may recoil or back off and jump back from textures of certain foods. If they don't want to eat it, there might be a good reason. It might be the texture of the food that causes them to get so upset about somebody making them eat something that they don't want to eat. But others seem just shut down completely. They seem unresponsive to anything at all. Many children, yeah, that's good. Thank you. Many children with sensory processing disorders. You can go ahead.
I'm sorry, Libby. For some reason, that other part isn't coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to just move?
Okay, keep going then. Well,
Okay.
I'll just tell you, many children with the sensory processing disorder start out as fussy babies who become anxious as they grow older. The kids often don't handle change well, and they frequently throw tantrums and meltdowns. So now, this does not mean that a child that was born and was a fussy baby has sensory processing disorder. It is about the fact that many of them, this is something that's like, if you look back in the past and see that as one of the things that the behaviors that the child in the past has displayed, you can add it up and go cha-ching. That's another one that that's a red flag for us to look at. They don't handle, the kids often don't handle change well, and they may frequently throw tantrums and have meltdowns. I have a granddaughter, and she was a fussy baby, and she has, whenever she's around her cousin and they play hard, and I mean they're running around and she gets very overwhelmed, and by the time and she keeps herself together while her cousin's there, but the minute they walk out the door, she will have the biggest meltdown you can imagine. She was overstimulated, and this was the only way that she could cope, is just to lose it completely. This is something we need to be aware of when we see kids that are getting overstimulated and then they have a meltdown afterwards. It's not, again, we do not diagnose this, but it is a red flag. Many children have symptoms like these from time to time, but this is an important statement. But therapists consider a diagnosis of sensory processing disorder when the symptoms become so severe that it affects the normal functioning and disrupts their everyday life. So if it is something that, if a child has a sensory issue with wearing certain kinds of socks, then get them this kind of socks they'll use. That is not keeping them from being able to function normally. It just means they need a certain kind of sock. And if the child needs to have, anything that a child might have, we'll go through some more of them in a minute. So. Can you see the next one? Now, the treatment for sensory processing disorder is called Developmental Individual Difference Relationship-Based, or DIR, model. The therapy was developed by Stanley Greenspan, doctor, and Serena Wider with a PhD. The major part of the therapy, and I think this is really interesting, you guys could be involved in it too if the parents wanted you to be. But a major part of this therapy is the floor time method. This method involves multiple sessions of play with the child and parent. The play sessions last about 20 minutes, and they're scripted by an occupational therapist or whatever therapist that the child is being taken care of by. And it's important that these play sessions, that the parent does what the therapists say, but they do it in intermittent times in order to not overwhelm the children. And during the sessions, Parents are asked to follow the child's lead, even if the playtime behavior isn't typical. And this is important because forming relationship with the child and getting the child to understand what's going on is important for that child. So if the child has their finger in on the floor and they're rubbing it around and around and around in a circle, at the beginning of these sessions, the parent would go over and sit next to the child and do the exact same behavior. Round and around and around. And that child then that would bring them together as partners in something, anything that they can do. And you're following the child's lead rather than leading the child. And this is followed by a second phase where parents use the play sessions to create challenges for the child. These sessions are tailored to the child's need. For instance, if the child tends to underreact to touch and sound, the parent needs to be very energetic during the second phase of the play sessions. And if the child tends to overreact to touch and sound, then the parent will need to be more soothing. So if we need to help the child learn how to, the skills of doing the opposite of what they're being led to do by their own bodies. Okay. Now, I have this book up because I think it's one of very many. If you go online, and I have some in my resources, at the end of this, I have a bunch of different ones, but this is one of the books. It says it's 100 playful activities to empower children with sensory disabilities. And a lot of these games are games that other children would love to play. So if you have a child that's got a sensory disorder, then these might be some things that you can look up and find. But I suggest that instead, if the child has an occupational therapist, if you get permission from the parent, written permission from the parent, maybe the occupational therapist can give you ideas of where the child is and what's going on, so that, and give you ideas of things that you can do throughout the child's day when they're with you. Many families with an affected child find it is hard to get help. That's because sensory processing disorder isn't recognized by a medical diagnosis at the time, like I said before. And it's really, really a shame, because these children are really struggling. Despite the lack of widely accepted diagnostic criteria, occupational therapists commonly see and treat children and adults with sensory processing problems. When I was in the classroom with children with varying disabilities, and abilities, I had one child come in who had sensory processing disorder, and it was pretty heavy duty. And he also had autism. And just as Adrian said, sensory processing disorder does not mean the child has autism. It's the exact opposite. They are two separate things. One goes in one bucket and one goes in another, but he happened to have both of them at the same time, like I said about that with ADHD and the other ones. Now, what happens is that the children, you go to the parents and say, I'd like to be able to work with this occupational therapist, and they can give you ideas. But when I got an idea from an occupational therapist, she gave me one of those, those brushes that doctors use, the plastic with the little needles on them that they scrub with. And she gave me one of those, and they're very light, and they don't hurt anybody. So they're made to because doctors wash their hands so often. And she had me just run the brush up and down his arms and up and down his legs. And that was really a great thing that was going to help him desensitize to the touch. And the thing that she forgot to tell me was, what happens if I do it too much? Because I was really into it, and I did it. And we were sitting there, and I was giving him his rub, and you're never going to guess, he threw up all over me. I had been overstimulated, and that is one of the reactions that these children have. And we have to be careful to do what the doctors or the therapists say, not try to do it on our own. Treatment depends on a child's individual needs, but in general, it involves helping children to do better at activities they're normally not good at, and helping them to get used to things that they can't tolerate. So we're trying to help them at it, but it's a process. It's not something that one day they're going to be okay again. This is something that the treatment has to go through a process before they can do it. Treatment for sensory processing problems is called sensory integration. If you look that up, you can find a lot of information online about it, but I go to some reputable places like, anyway, the goal of sensory integration is to challenge a child in a fun, playful way so he or she can learn to respond appropriately and function more normally. That's really important. We want to make it fun, just like we do with all the children, right? If it's not fun and they're not able to move and they're not able to do stuff, if they don't learn as well. So this is just going along with best practice. Classroom accommodations for sensory processing issues. If you do have a child in your classroom that has been diagnosed or has been there's been a result that says that they have the processing disorder, there are some things that you can do. Now, a lot of these things, actually all of these things are good for all children in a classroom. Everybody should have a daily routine that changes as little as possible. Being on the spur of the moment, we know that consistency and structure in a classroom, not the children, but the adults in the classroom are consistent and structured, leads to children feeling safer and behaviors, challenging behaviors reduction. So having a routine, a daily routine, is important for all children, but specifically, especially for children with this SPD. Okay, the next one, give advice, give advance warning of routine changes. This is important because the processing has to go through, and that would cause a meltdown in some children if they don't know ahead of time. So if it gets cloudy outside, letting the kids know that there might be a change in their schedule because they might have to go, we might have to have playtime inside today because it looks like rain. Giving them that little warning will make your day and their day a lot better. Okay, this one I love, and I have the website where you can get this. It's called Brain Breaks. You know how you see that child that gets a twinkle in their eye, or you see this child that's getting overstimulated by something that's going on? You can give your children brain breaks, and that's what you can call them, just brain breaks. And you can have them do certain things like walk around the room, or okay, we're in the middle of circle time and where everybody is doing good, and then all of a sudden they start wandering with their eyes and they're talking to their friends. We can say, up, time for a brain break. All right, everybody up, let's go for a walk around the classroom. Let's go find something. Let them go on a hunt of blue things and come back. And that is giving them a brain break in order for them to do that. And that can be for anybody, but it really helps when the children with sensory processing disorders have an issue. Okay, establish clear starting and ending times for tasks. Now, if you have a starting time and you have designated a certain amount of time and you're seeing that the task is taking a little longer for certain children, and you're the one that messed up by giving them less time than they needed, then allowing for a little more time, but make sure that at the ending time you let them know that this is the ending time. Okay. Post visual schedules. These are all things that I believe should be in every child's classroom. Post a visual schedule of their day. It needs to have pictures on it. It can't just be words. Make sure that they know directions, whatever the directions are. Make sure they're clear on any of the activities that they're doing. You have class rules, go over them daily until all the children understand them and they can say them to you, and go over them again if you have any new children coming into your classroom, as well as the expectations. We want to make sure that they know what your expectations are so that they can succeed and not cause challenging behaviors. And make sure the children sees them, put them at their level, not up high. They need to be at eye level. For any visuals that you have in your classroom, should not be above the child's eye level. Use visuals with pictures of, I have this in the handouts. It's sensory input choices, and the children, they're for preschool and for grade school. I did that because you could have after schoolers that might have this, and it's important that you maybe look at the pictures and see them, the visuals. The children can pick different activities that they want to do. No. Okay. We want to help children build their self-regulation skills, because that's what happens. They lose it and they have no self-regulation skills. So we want to provide a quiet workspace to use when needed. And we want to seat the children away from doors and windows and buzzing lights. Now, if we have a choice and you have a big window or you have an open window that the children might see in, allow that child to be the one that sits in the chair that their back faces the window. And any buzzing lights, it's very distracting and it's very hard on them, and they will have trouble with that. Adjust the chair so the child's feet are flat on the floor and their hips are at a 90-degree angle, or put something like a footstool or a block or something under the table so that the child can put their feet on that. It's the inability to be able to keep myself balanced, because a lot of times they do have gross motor issues. It's important for them to feel safe in their chair. Let the student use alternative seating, like an exercise ball or a stand-up desk. Now, these might be things that an occupational therapist might recommend. I would want to have them have it. And then you'll see the next one. Consult with an occupational therapist about attaching a stretchy exercise band to the chair legs of a desk or a chair for students who need to bounce their feet. Now, my daughter bounces her feet and drives her brothers and sisters crazy with this. So I have to tell you that I wish I had that for her when she was growing up. But it is, I have seen children that they use it for them, even children that have the tendency to get up and walk around because they need that stimulation on their feet. And so they get up and they walk around a lot. But when they they put their feet behind the top of their feet behind the rubber band, and it's a thick rubber band, and they can move their feet back and forth and up and down, and they sat for a lot longer when that happened. Let the student work in a different position, like lying on the floor, using a clipboard or an easel. This is important. Children need to have choices in their lives. It's important that they be able to have a choice in things like that. You know, I saw some children that were 18 months old that had the option to either have their bottom on their little area or their belly. And it gave them, and you know what? They sat through a whole 15-minute, 18 months old now. And there were 3 of the children out of the 7 children had some kind of delay, had a disability. So if they had the option to either lay on their belly or sit down on their bottom, and the movement allowing them to move back and forth just in their spot, they stayed the entire time, participated, and were engaged in it. So it's important for us to give children choices and allow them some freedom when we can. Provide a weighted lap pad, weighted vest, and this is again something the occupational therapist needs to approve, or a wiggle cushion, because these are things that they have that they can possibly get with insurance too. Provide noise muffling headphones to help with noisy sensitivity. This might be something that the parent might be using at home. You can ask what they do at home, and if they do have headphones, then that might be helpful. Let the children use handheld fidgets. Consider using a fidget contract. This is important. Fidgets, I was working with I'm the inclusion specialist, for one of the inclusion specialists, I should say, for Broward County. And we go into the child care centers, and there was a child that was having a lot of trouble sitting anywhere for over a period of just a couple of minutes. But he loved a certain little fidget toy that they would let him play with when they needed him to sit for even just a short period of time. And they were in circle time, and he was having a hard time. He would jump up and he would run in the room, and he would disrupt things, and it was really hard. And they had only been in circle time for a few minutes. And so what happened is that when they said, oh, he likes to play with this, and I took it over to him, and I gave it to him, and this was a BPK class, and I gave it to him, and I said, first, you need to keep the toy in your lap, and you can play with it. Then you can keep the toy. And he looked at me, and I said, first you need to hold this in your lap, and you can move it, but you need to keep it in your lap, because he had a tendency of wanting to fly it around and do all sorts of stuff. Anyway, so so he put it in his lap, and of course he was in the habit of getting up and doing that. So I was sitting behind him, and when he started to lift the toy up, I got down, and I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just whispered in his ear, first you need to keep it in your lap, then you can keep the toy. And you know what? He went right back down to it. So when we give children things and they're in the habit of doing another behavior, it might take a little time, but it is a helpful thing for them to have something to play with or to look at or hold, just for the sensory of holding something. Let the children sit on a carpet square or beanbag during group seating. So you know what? Sometimes the texture of whatever they're sitting, the class is sitting on, is irritating to the child. So giving them something else to sit on might cause the child to be more comfortable and not have the behaviors that are not wanted in the classroom. Let the children move as needed within a space outlined in tape or at a seat to the side. Now this one, this is something that they can move inside that area. This is not someplace to send a child. This is for them to go to in order to get rid of whatever energy they need to calm down. So this is not a place for timeout. This is a place for them to go to be able to settle down. Work with the student to come up with nonverbal signals to use when overwhelmed or in need of a break. Now this is not to be done in the middle of an overwhelmed period for this child. This is to be done at a different time. And the important thing is you need to work with the child. They come up with the way they're going to show you non-verbally what they need. And you guys can talk about it, and they can make the decisions, because those will be the ones that they will react to a lot faster, because they created them. Create a proactive behavior plan for handling sensory triggers. That's what can you do when your socks are bothering you? What can you do? What can you do? And they ask them what they can do, and it might be come to you and ask you for help. That would be a strategy. But the strategy again we need to have strategies that will work for both you and the child, not something that you come up with. Give advance warning and verbal reminders of loud noises like bells, announcements, etc. I had children with varying disabilities in my classroom, and the fire drills were a nightmare. The rest of the day was gone, and the children it was horrible. So if there's any way that you find out that the announcement are at a certain time, or if if you have a loudspeaker at your school, being able to prepare the children for that will make your life a lot easier, and theirs a lot happier too. Okay. I have put into, if you think you have a student in your preschool or even your aftercare, like I said before, who you think has difficulty in sensory processing, I have put into the handouts a fact sheet that I've talked about. I've talked about a lot of stuff, and I've really given you a lot of information here, but it's important for us to understand, again, that these are things that the children are experiencing that they have no control over. So we need to be able to be kind to them and give them what they need in order for them to be successful in your classroom and in their lives. Does anybody have any questions? You can put them in the chat box just like you did for Adrian. And let's see.
I'm looking too, Livy. I don't see any questions or anything yet. Let's see. Okay, I don't see any questions.
Okay, well then, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Thank you very much. My name again is Libby Snyder, but my name is also Elizabeth. And so my email address is SNYDER@elcbroward.org. I really enjoyed presenting this. I hope that you were able to get some information that might be helpful to you today or in the future. And I think there's one more slide. Yeah. And this is, you might want to take a picture of this, but this is all different areas. This is one where 3x5 cards to get the kids to understand feelings and what they're feeling. And it's a strength chain. It's a cute chain where when the children accomplish something, you can add another strip of colored paper with what they've succeeded in doing onto the chain, and they can continue to make the chain. And you can do this with any of the children. So there's tips, and there's specific things about sensory processing issues. There's the visuals, sensory diet activity suggestions. There's a place you can go called Star Institute. It has some free information, but they also charge for services because they have professionals that do that, the occupational therapists and doctors. And Sensory Smarts is a really good one. It helps for the kid, they help kids with sensory processing disorder and their families, and they find support and treatment. So if you have somebody and they don't know who to go to, this would be a good place to go. They can connect parents and families with other sources that they might have. And that's the same with the third one, local and national organizations that they can find resources and support for individuals with sensory issues. And these are really great places to get information about it if you want to seek out more information. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. We really appreciate your participation. We hope that you enjoyed the information that we've shared. And I want to give everybody a few more minutes to download the handouts if you have not already. They have really good information on them. They're good strategies that you can use in your classrooms. A lot of the things that Libby covered in her portion of the training is on those handouts. A lot of the things that I covered, it's on the handouts as well. So please use those handouts. They are beneficial to you. So I'll give you a few more minutes before we end, but I thank you so much for attending today.